Welcome to another episode of Crosstalk. Of course, this is the 7th Plymouth edition. It's so easy for me to say that. When I try to say the 6th Plymouth, it's usually a struggle. But as you know, this particular program, the 7th Plymouth, we have a chance to sit down on a regular basis with the state representative who represents, Whitman, Abington, and East Bridgewater. The one and only Geoff Diehl here.
Kevin, good to see you.
Welcome. It's been a couple of weeks since we last saw you.
Yep.
And we have since crossed over into summer.
It is summer. One thing that happened, obviously, since the last time we talked, as you mentioned, I think off camera before, was the passing of Steve Roy, who ran WHCA. So somebody who's been integral to the community forever with all the programming that he did. And sorry to see him pass. And certainly, want to think about him today when we're in here taping.
Yeah, he usually would be the gentleman who would be behind the controls and flying everything in, but the show, as he would say, the show must go on, and so we thank you very much. The WHCA family thanks you very much for those kind words.
Well, I think I've mentioned it before too. My wife and I used to watch at night when they're playing some of the old stuff from the 80s, and she would be on there, and and he was the guy that was shooting that stuff, and that's back again in the 80s, and so he's been doing it for quite a long time. God
bless him. Well, we still thankfully have that footage that we can play over and over and over again.
That's right.
Let's. What have you been doing since the last time we saw you? You must be kids getting out of school, getting ready for
a lot of graduations going on. My own kids, obviously, one of them's moving into high school this year, making that change myself. Getting used to that. But no, a lot of things up on Beacon Hill as well, as far as the budget. The House passed. Now the Senate's going to be taking it up shortly, and then we'll be moving into ratifying it out of conference committee in July. Ideally getting it done in July because we have to have it done.
Yes, some of the word that I'm understanding that we've been hearing for the past couple of days is that there is a deficit that the conference committee is trying to tackle in regards to the fiscal 2017 budget. How is this possible?
Yeah. So what happens is at the beginning of each fiscal year, they create a revenue consensus hearing, and 3 or 4 different groups do their best to try to project what we're going to bring in. And just a few months ago, there was projections that it might be about 300 or so million short. And that, well, it sounds like a lot of money, is something that's actually sort of absorbable in the fact that we have that rainy day fund if we have to. Sometimes capital gains comes in after January strongly enough to cover sort of those gaps. But right now we're looking at more of a gap of close to $750 million, which, when you start getting close to $1 billion in your budget gap, all of a sudden you have to start talking about real cuts and really figuring out where this revenue is going to come from in the last month or so of the fiscal year. So what it looks like now is that the governor may enact some 9C cuts, emergency cuts, to cover some of the problems there. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, what we have to do is try to continue to make Massachusetts a better business environment so that we can grow those companies, grow the jobs, so that the tax revenue comes in and we don't find ourselves in this type of shortfall. Any
worries that we could be seeing ourselves drifting back into some form of a financial crisis that we saw a number of years ago? Is that possible?
If you also look at the general picture nationally, there's some hesitation in the stock market. There's a lot of things going on. Yeah, 8 years after the last election and when we had that last financial collapse, you're looking at a stock market that's sort of trying to gauge, who's running for president, what the impact might be on the economy. The British exit of the euro could be a factor in this whole thing. We have a lot of exports out of Massachusetts to the European countries. Britain leaving the euro could affect that. So there's a lot of things that could affect the Massachusetts market, but also the broader market of the United States as a whole.
Well, I'm trying to avoid saying the R word, and those who know, it's recession.
Some of the indicators are showing that while we haven't added enough jobs, there are also a record number, 93 million people out of the workforce, and that is an indicator of a potential recession. So we've got to really, again, do all we can down in D.C. and up on Beacon Hill to try to make sure that we don't have loss of jobs. And I know it's been a big issue on the campaign trail for the presidency, is trying to make better deals internationally so that we bring companies back in instead of continue to lose them overseas, China, Mexico, places like that.
I know one of the things that you had mentioned during our conversation as to what we're going to sit down and discuss in front of the cameras is that something that we usually annually hear about a buzz right around August, just before back to school, and that is the sales tax holiday. It's something that's discussed, voted on, and signed by whomever is governor. There's a possibility we won't see one of those this year. Is that true?
No, that's absolutely true. I mean, the fact of the matter is every dime counts right now up on Beacon Hill. And while I have always been a proponent of the sales tax holiday, let's keep more money in people's pockets, and I'd vote for it again this time. But we want to make sure that we do have the revenue to come in and cover the cost of operating the state as it is now. I mean, look, we already have issues with transportation. We have issues at DCF, and we need to make sure that we cover what we're supposed to be covering in those departments, and the revenue that comes in is needed for that. So I still am holding out hope that they can figure out a way to cover the crisis in the budget deficit, but also at the same time maybe give those retailers and consumers a chance to keep a little more money back in our pockets for ourselves.
You talk about the governor having to make 9C cuts. Talk about that we have a stabilization fund or a rainy day fund. Is there a possibility that this conference committee could look to dip into that, or not? They cannot do that.
Well, they can with a vote of, a 2/3 vote of the House and Senate, but I don't think that we're going to be looking to try to take away rainy day fund. The other thing too is we have to keep our bond rating up. It just, we had
that stabilization fund is important for that.
Exactly. That's how the banks determine what kind of borrowing we can do. And by the way, we're about to tee up on a large transportation borrowing bill. The good news is that the state portion is significantly lower than what the feds will be doing to match what we're going to do, but we're going to look to borrow about $135 million to bond for transportation as far as road construction and upgrade and fixing bridges which are a span of 20 feet or smaller. But we're going to spend about $50 million on that and about $750 million on the road construction. Now again, Mass only spends about $135 million. The feds will be matching or giving us more than matching a significant amount because they just passed their own transportation bill recently, which was way overdue. They talk about roads and bridges as issues not just in Massachusetts but around the country, and they finally are deciding to put their money where their mouth is. Same thing with Amtrak. I remember the derailment
Sure.
about a year or so ago it was. People they've deferred maintenance on Amtrak just like we've deferred on our MBTA generally, the T. And so the feds finally again kicked in more money for transportation, and now we're going to be seeing some of that being spent in Massachusetts to fix some of the problems that we've had.
How big of a jump starter is something like this as far as jobs? You're talking close to $1 billion in expenditures for fixing roadways. You said, again, bridges around 20 feet. Give me your thoughts on how this could help our state.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, it not only helps the workers that work for the highway departments, but also the companies that work, to support things like this, asphalt companies, steel manufacturers, a lot of groups that, help do the infrastructure. Another thing locally or semi-locally is Plymouth. Plymouth is going to be celebrating,
400 years.
400 years
Yep.
very shortly. And if anybody's gone down to Plymouth lately, you've seen that rotary downtown that got worked on. It's finally, finished, but they're continuing to try to do some infrastructure improvements because they expect to get millions of people as tourists coming through Plymouth in 2020 is when the
1620.
1620.
That's what it says on the big rock.
That's right. 1620 when they landed, and 2020. I keep thinking 2016. In 2020, we'll be seeing that whole basically a year of celebration, and that requires infrastructure. So those are the type of projects there and around the state that have to go on right now, and they've been kind of pushed off. Finally, we're getting federal money to help with that.
You talked about the transportation situation. Let's talk a little bit about the MBTA. It seems as though there are more problems.
I wouldn't say so much more. I would just say continued problems.
Continued problems.
Continued
okay,
problems.
Okay.
We've, again, deferred maintenance for years, close to $6 billion in deferred maintenance. They now project that it's closer to $7, maybe $9 billion in trying to, take care of that deferred maintenance. There is now a plan to work on a 5-year plan to try to work on about $6 billion worth of that deferred maintenance. So that's good that they're finally getting ready to step up and bite the bullet on that. But at the same time, we still have outages, and service not really working as it's supposed to regularly, so that people are not being able to make it to work. On top of that, overcrowded cars, which leads to a lack of fare collection. And last year, lack of fare collection led to millions and millions of dollars that could have gone towards maintenance and all that. And so, the company that manages Keolis, that manages the commuter rail, they've talked about the fact that they need to continue to step up efforts. So there's that management and fiscal control board that was put in place by Governor Baker.
Right.
Their work is a 3-year period of time with the Pacheco law being lifted to try to figure out ways to quickly and very carefully get the T back up and running and functioning, and so their work's not done yet for sure.
And they've also, I want to say that the recent conversation is they were trying to find ways to trigger early retirement. Some of the folks who are still, from what I understand, there's been an ongoing looking at how the retirement system is, and people can retire after X amount of years and get a full pension, and they could be relatively young like you and I.
Right.
And they are kind of working on that, are they not?
They are. They call them ERIPs, Early Retirement Incentive Programs. Fact of the matter is that because the MBTA is a quasi-governmental agency, meaning the governor really doesn't have direct oversight until he got his fiscal control board in place, and the legislature doesn't have oversight. They always were sort of a floating entity that ran itself, yet always was asking the legislature to prop them up with additional funds because they were operating at a continual loss, and the pension fund was a big part of that because people were retiring after a very short period of time of service, and then it became upside down. You had more people being paid from the retirement fund than were paying into it, and no system can sustain itself that way. So what they're doing is looking to see if they can do a buyout where employees will take an early retirement, and at that point new employees coming in are under a different, they're no longer going to have that early retirement.
Will be grandfathered into that old system.
Into the old system, exactly. So we're trying to see if we can also clean up some of that, and going forward have employees that are going to put in, just like anybody else would, a good 30, 40-year career.
I'm going to digress back to the transportation project that you were talking about, but with it is a caveat about local gas tax options. Is that something that is still being talked about in the House at this time?
There's two things out there that are being floated and for new revenue. One of them doesn't take effect until next year if the voters in 2018 enact it, which is the millionaires tax, calling it the millionaires tax. It's really just another version of the graduated income tax. So if you make over $1 million, they're just setting an arbitrary number of $1 million. Now you'll pay an additional 4% in revenue. So we actually had a vote in the legislature. It actually was a constitutional convention because it would change the Constitution of Massachusetts. And what it does is it actually breaks the Constitution from not ever mentioning tax rates to now saying there can be multiple tax rates, which allows them to then create several tiers. They're going to say it's only a 2-tier, people over $1 million, but New York and California have basically gone into a graduated income tax, and what ends up happening is when the money leaves the state from millionaires who are able to move their money out of state or move themselves out of state, then what happens is the revenue that they decided to spend based on that starts to be pushed down into the middle class and lower income families. And so, for example, in New York State, you've got a rate of almost 8% 8% income tax on people making $40,000 to $60,000. It's completely going the opposite direction of what we should be doing as far as trying to get an economy where people have more money in their pocket and are spending more. Right. But be that as it may, that's one plan that's actually in effect. And because it's a constitutional convention, it had to be voted on by the legislature once, voted on it twice in those joint votes, and then it goes to the voters for a vote at a ballot question. Now, this has happened 5 times before, and it's been defeated 5 times before. I don't see it succeeding, but it is one of those new revenue generators that's being proposed on Beacon Hill. The other one, related to transportation, although again, like I said, we finally have an investment now. I'm hoping this quells this desire to take more of our money, is a local option for the gas tax. And people may know about local options because towns have enacted a local option to collect some more money here, in, for example, Whitman or Hanson, to make sure that they have funds for the town. They
like a community preservation fund.
Like a CPA. They kind of take a little extra at the restaurants to pay for that. Well, what this would do is allow towns to take a little extra tax on your gas at the local level, not the state level. There's the federal tax, there's the state tax, and now they want to allow the locals to have a tax. And what we see there is not just mass confusion, because you could potentially have a situation where you're in any one of the 351 cities and towns of Massachusetts and paying who knows what they decided to add on at the local level for gas. So it could be all over the place that way, which is not good. Secondly, again, we just need to tighten up our spending up on Beacon Hill. We spend 4 times the national average for our road maintenance, and it's $675,000 per road mile per year we spend to maintain our roads, versus New Hampshire is also 4 times less than us. $145,000 they spend on average per road mile for maintenance, and we have the same road conditions as far as frost thaw cycles, same type of asphalt needed. Somehow we must have magical asphalt that costs 4 times more than New Hampshire. It's amazing, but that's, what I'm saying is basically we can do a better job of capping our costs in that road maintenance each year, to not have to ask taxpayers to pay a third tax on gas, which would be the local level.
So are these two things that we're going to hear a lot more about in the coming weeks and months?
Yeah, so session ends at the end of July. We have to be done by then. And so, a lot of bills get kind of pushed out right there in the last few weeks, so it becomes a flurry of legislation and a lot
before
of
the session ends.
Yes,
right,
and a lot of late night gaveling, and to make sure that these things are all done before we hit our expiration date on the general court. But anyway, that I would expect being one of the few that we end up debating. I'd say it's probably going to come out for a debate in the House and possibly the Senate. Hopefully we defeat it in the House and don't have to move it on.
Are you going to be in hover mode? Because I know that there's been a couple of times that you have found yourself when where there's quieter times, to make sure that people aren't going, that your colleagues aren't going in and trying to have like a surprise session to try to push something through.
Yeah, so that's the other thing. We allow informal sessions where they can actually enact laws while we're not in session.
When no one's looking.
When no one's up there, exactly. And what it takes is just one legislator to sit in the House chamber to block anything that may be questionable. So yes, this is the time when I especially am making sure that we are covering everything during those days when they say that nothing's going to happen. Well, you never know if nothing's really going to happen. We saw a year ago, I believe it was now, actually a year and a half ago, was when there was an attempt to push legislative pay raises through, and I sat in the chamber for a good month, making sure that no pay raises were done.
People don't realize this, that you do this stuff.
I'm in the minority party. Let's just face it. A Republican in Massachusetts, a small group of us, but there are certain procedural ways that you can try to prevent things from happening that may not benefit your district, and it's just one of the things I try to make sure we do, is stay on top of these type of things.
Now, other than being a legislator for 3 communities that you serve, you're also somebody who, you're looking at the bigger picture right now. We know we get the presidential race that's going on right now. You, of course, are the co-chair of Donald Trump's Massachusetts campaign.
That's right.
How's that going for you?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, what's exciting is the win that he had in the primary. It was the biggest primary win he had up until that point. 20-something states had voted. We were the biggest percentage, as far as we're at 49.6% with a field of, my gosh, I think there was still 6 or 8 candidates in the field. And then at the same time, following the primary success, and during that primary, by the way, 20,000 Democrats unenrolled so they could be able to vote for Donald Trump, and we've seen continued unenrollment since his win in all these states that want to, I think, vote for him as an independent. So it's been an interesting time as far as the primary and then the delegate selection process. The convention's coming up at the end of July as well, and I'll be going to that. Yep. And there was a whole process by which Ted Cruz was trying to come in after these primaries and sort of get his people elected as the delegates so that they could flip their votes at the convention and have Ted Cruz become that. I'm sure everybody remembers that crazy period of time. And in Massachusetts, we not only stopped that story from happening, but we reversed it. We ended up taking Ted Cruz's seats, seats that Cruz had earned during the primary, and became Trump seats. So, we were very organized in Massachusetts. We plan to be very organized for November. In fact, there's my friend Steve Aylward that worked on the gas tax ballot question with me a couple of years ago is going to be heading up a PAC. It's MakeMAGreat.com. If people want to go look at that, MakeMAGreat.com, they can get involved with that PAC and help out with volunteering and all that sort of stuff. So it's we certainly are organized in Massachusetts to try to deliver not just strong numbers, but potentially a win. People don't think that Massachusetts is in play usually. Even Speaker DeLeo, prominent Democrat, said that he thinks Massachusetts could go Donald Trump in November. And
it's interesting that you mentioned as far as how Donald's going, and you talk about Senator Cruz, who, it was interesting. One week he's naming his VP GOP. Next week he's suspending his campaign, but yet there's still a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes that a lot of people don't realize that's happening.
These campaigns, it seems like they can turn on a dime, but I'll tell you now at this point when it's narrowed down between obviously Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, I think you're going to start to see much more of a focus by each of those guys on strictly the other camp, right? Both have conventions to go to. The Democrats' convention is in Philadelphia. There are a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters that are going down there saying that they will not support her. But at the same time, I know Donald Trump is trying to make sure that the GOP is united behind him as well. So this is strange times we're living in. Certainly something that I think people come the fall will be paying even more attention to once they get back from all the summer activities. Hopefully they're enjoying right now.
Usually, and I got to say, is I watch you and I follow you on social media, and you're somebody who's like right in the thick of things, especially when I see crossfires between and Elizabeth Warren and Donald Trump, and I see you kind of in there.
Don't forget Congressman Moulton, who's taking shots at Donald Trump. Look, I'm not afraid to call out anybody who's trying to take cheap shots at the candidate that I support, because I think the candidate I support speaks with the voice of the people. He's certainly not, used to politics himself. He speaks with a rougher voice, but I think he speaks with honesty and a great love of America, and I think that's one of the reasons I was attracted to him. He brings a business sense to D.C. that I think we're lacking in D.C. and up on Beacon Hill, and that's why I think he is the kind of guy that's going to go in and change a lot of the way business is done, because nobody, I think, anymore really trust that Congress is doing the will of the people. And when you have senators and congressmen from our state that are calling him out, I'm going to make sure that I set the record straight as well.
Have you had a chance to meet or speak to him on the phone, Donald Trump?
I have spoken with Donald Trump, and
what's that like?
Well, he sounds just like you hear him on TV or on the radio.
Yeah.
But he's certainly he's very gracious. I think he's the kind of person that obviously if you are with him, he's with you. He's very loyal to the folks that support him. But at the same time, if you attack him, I think you should expect to probably catch a little heat from him back. So I'd say that he's somebody that's respectful of people, on anybody and everybody. And it's just up to you as to how you decide you want to relate to Donald Trump. But anyway, he's very nice and obviously allowed me to become the co-chair of the campaign. So that was a great talk.
Anything else you want to touch upon in regards to presidential politics?
No, I mean, again, you're going to see, I think, a lot of activity after the convention in July on both sides, getting out there and trying to promote their candidate. And I think we'll find out more about what's going on. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of things. The tragedy that happened in Orlando recently certainly played a big part in setting a tone for this, for a period of time right now that I think is sort of defining a little bit about where people see their candidates standing on issues between terrorism, guns, things like that. And I just think it's important that people recognize that regardless of what you think of either candidate, they both do care about this country, and they are trying to make sure that they will represent what's best for us as American people in November. And I am hoping that the rhetoric kind of calms down a little bit about that. And
now, what's your role at the Republican National Convention in Cleveland? I mean, are you going to be hanging with all the delegates, or are you going to be somewhere else? Where will you be? We're watching on TV. Will we be able to see a Geoff Diehl somewhere in a camera shot somewhere?
I hope not. I mean, it's that's not my thing, believe it or not. I'll be a delegate, so I'll be on the floor, right? 4 years ago, I went to the convention in Tampa Bay. I was an alternate delegate, so I sat in the audience up in the stands. This time I'll be on the floor and we'll be casting a vote. I'm the official spokesman for the Massachusetts delegation, so I'll be doing talking to Radio Row, doing interviews for the delegates, and making sure that, again, Donald Trump is represented correctly by the media, and just make sure that we let people know what's going on at the convention as well. It's an interesting, 4 or 5 days, and a lot of stuff happens behind the scenes, and I'm happy to try to convey back to Massachusetts what's going on.
All right. We'll bring our conversation back to your district, the 7th Plymouth district. Whitman coming up, 4th of July, right around the corner, and I'm sure you've already reserved your spot in the park for the watermelon.
Get my table, get the watermelons, cut them up fresh, and hand them out to the kids and the parents and everything. It's usually, we've only had a few rainy days in the last, I don't know, my gosh, it's been about 8 years since I've been doing this.
Was it last year or the year before?
Year before it rained, yeah. And so hopefully we get a great day, and rain or shine, I'll be down there either way. But to be honest with you, it's one of the most fun times because you got the kids with their egg tosses, and you've got the clowns painting faces. You've got the dunk tank, which I've done in the past.
You climb right up in there.
If it's hot enough,
we get you on video. Climbed right up in there. No, you're not shy. Might even egg on a person or two. Come on, you can't throw it. I've seen it.
Oh yeah, no. Look, these kids have better arms than I wish. They're very good at knocking you in. But no, the scouts set up their hot dogs and hamburgers. There's the bouncy tent. So it's a great day in Whitman to get out and really just see folks and have a fun time. Win some awards.
We want to mention that when mentioning your district, you have a new legislative aide.
Yes.
He actually is out of the great town of East Bridgewater.
Yep, David Walsh. Actually, he was the first young man I presented an Eagle citation from the House to way back when.
Eagle to Eagle.
Eagle to Eagle, exactly. And he ended up, finishing up college just a little while ago, and it just so happened I was ready to make a change with my legislative aide. Okay. So we got him in there, and now somebody in the district from East Bridgewater traveling up and down the corridor with me to the State House. So Dave Walsh is the new legislative aide, and people can certainly reach out to my office, which is, I'll say it earlier than I usually do.
Yeah, absolutely.
617-722-2810 is the way to get in touch with me. Yep. And David's also there if I happen to be in session or during a committee hearing.
As they see it flashing up on the screen up in front of you. Let's talk about something that I always marvel when I'm at one of the concert series. I know Abington does a summer concert series, right?
Abington has a great summer concert series, as does Whitman.
As does Whitman.
But Abington is coming up very soon, and they have about 10. I want to say they think they have like 10 concerts this summer. I think Whitman does what? Is it 6 or 8?
They got 6. I think it's Thursday. They're going to start on the end of June.
Gina Mark is the first one,
and then the folks on the Whitman Cultural Council, they do a fantastic job.
Well, my wife used to be on the Cultural Council, so she'll be angry that I don't even know that it's 6. But she was the one that would remind me to get out there with the lollipops, and again, it's a great chance to kind of mingle with the folks and just kind of take some questions and answer some things that are going on around the state and up on Beacon Hill. And for Abington, exactly, they do a wonderful job up there as well.
Yeah, because anybody who's looking for you, you're usually walking around handing out flyers or lollipops.
Some people like that I give out watermelon. I did watermelon one year, and that was a big hit. Really? So I'll give it a shot, get the muscles going, carry those watermelons around.
Anything you want to say in closing? We have about 2 minutes left before we wrap up our program here.
Yeah, no, I just think that, again, what people probably know from me is that I like to make sure I'm out in the district as much as possible, and the summer is a great time for me to do that. But I also have office hours, or district hours that I make time for. I stop in at each of the senior centers once a month. At each of the 3 senior centers 1 month, and then at Town Hall before a selectmen's meeting in the next month, and I sequentially do that. So you can always meet me there. My legislative aide, David Walsh, can certainly put you in touch with me on when to meet on those things. I can also have personal meetings with folks at Dunkin' Donuts if they want to have a private sort of talk. One-on-one, yeah. One-on-one. And I'll just continue to do that work. And you can always get me too on my website, Facebook page. My website's geoffdiehl.com, GeoffDiehl.com. And Facebook is Facebook/Geoff Diehl.
I always get a kick out. You didn't say the thing as far as your mom decided to be different with your name. You say that when you spell out your name.
I must have been an awful delivery, or it's for her to punish me with the spelling.
Unique name.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's very unique.
Unique is a polite way to put it.
Any plans for a little R&R with you and the family this summer at all?
Now that you mention it, we're going to try to catch a Broadway show in New York. Take a long weekend to do that.
Hamilton.
Those tickets are impossible to get. If you can get me tickets, then you are the man. But no, I can't get the Hamilton tickets.
There's a reason why it won so many Tonys.
Yeah. So we'll see a Broadway show, and I'm sure I'll hit the beach at some point. But again, staycation, mostly living in the district.
Well, I want to thank you very much for your time and your energy, and for always coming here and doing a regular program. It's definitely appreciated. I do hear from people in the district, and they appreciate it. We also share the program with other access centers as well. And we want to thank you for tuning in to this Crosstalk program, 7th Plymouth District, and we'll have more for you coming up in the months and weeks ahead. Until next time, have a great day.